Welcome to Mission Majjhima, Ajahn.
Ajahn.
So, Ajahn, tell us about the Mahāgosiṅga Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 32.
In this sutta, another really well-known one, we find the Buddha along with many great disciples of his in the Gosinga woods. And it starts off in a very endearing and rather, if you know the different characters involved, it's a very magical scene. So in a certain way, very earthly, very believable in another. But we have Mahāgosiṅga, the Buddha's disciple foremost in psychic powers, goes up to Mahākassapa, the disciple foremost in ascetic practices, and says, let's go talk to Venerable Sariputta about the Dhamma. And then Anuruddha, the foremost in the divine eye, joins them. And then Ananda sees these great disciples going, Ananda being the Buddha's main attendant and the foremost in several qualities, which we might list later. He mentions to Revata, he goes up to Revata, who's the Buddha's Venerable Revata, the foremost in jhana, in doing deep absorption meditation, and says, let's go and listen to this talk, let's go and hear what Sariputta has to say. They all approach, and Sariputta actually is the first one to speak and starts the conversation rather than having everything turn his way, which everyone is going to him, but he turns it to Ananda and asks a question of Ananda, which he'll then repeat to all of the other disciples. He says, friend, the Gosinga sala tree wood is delightful, the night is moonlit, the sala trees are all in blossom, and heavenly scents seem to be floating in the air. What kind of bhikkhu, what kind of monk, practitioner, could illuminate this Gosinga sala tree wood? So this is just a great question you can ask your Dhamma friends to figure out what their ideal of a holy life is, what their ideal of a spiritual life is. And then each of the monastics answer according to their preference, according to their heart. Ananda says the monastic, the practitioner who would illuminate the Gosinga sala tree wood would be a bhikkhu who has learned much, remembered what they have heard, and consolidated what they have learned. Such teachings as are good in the beginning, in the middle, in the end. They have learned much, remembered, mastered verbally, investigated with the mind, and penetrated well by view. And they teach the Dhamma to the four assemblies with well-rounded and coherent statements and phrases for the eradication of the underlying tendencies. Boom. Ananda drops it right there. And then the same question is asked to Venerable Revata. Venerable Revata responds that the ideal monk is a bhikkhu who delights in solitary meditation and takes delight in solitary meditation. They are devoted to internal serenity of mind. They do not neglect meditation. They possess insight and they dwell in empty huts. Then Anuruddha answers to his heart, to his inspiration, saying, here, one with the divine eye, which is purified and surpasses the human, a practitioner surveys 1,000 worlds. So someone who has the divine eye, that's the ideal practitioner. Then Mahākassapa has a very extended answer, praising people who practice asceticism, monastics who practice living in the forest, eating alms food, wearing very simple robes, just 3 robes, people who are content of few wishes, being secluded, being aloof from society, being energetic, possessed of virtue, concentration, wisdom, deliverance, knowledge and vision of deliverance, and who teach those and expound those to others. Mahāgosiṅga answers to his heart, saying, here, in a very interesting answer from Mahāgosiṅga, 2 bhikkhus engage in a talk on the higher Dhamma, and they question each other, and each, being questioned by the other, answers without foundering, and their talk rolls on in accordance with the Dhamma. That kind of bhikkhu would illuminate the Gosinga sala tree wood. And Sariputta answers, here, a bhikkhu wields mastery over their mind. They do not let the mind wield mastery over them. In the morning, they abide in whatever abiding or attainment they want to. Same in the morning and in the evening, throughout the day and at midday. They don't let the mind overmaster them. And then they all delight. And then they go to the Buddha. And the Buddha says, sadhu, sadhu, that's great. You all answered according to your heart. And I would answer like this. The Buddha says, the bhikkhu who illuminates the sala tree woods would be a bhikkhu who has returned from their alms round after their meal. They sit down, folding their legs crosswise, setting their body erect, and establishing mindfulness in front of them, resolving, I shall not break this sitting position until through not clinging, my mind is liberated from the taints. So a beautiful ending, and of course all the bhikkhus delight and rejoice because it's great. So what would you like to highlight from this, Ajahn?
I think what you pointed to was just the painting the scene with all these beings and on all the subtleties and nuance of their interaction is really worth noting. First we're introduced to this over the course of this kind of reading the canon. We'll become familiar with these characters who are designated by the Buddha as foremost in this or that. And effectively, this is, these are the Buddhist saints. You might feel a deep connection with one or the other. And that's meaningful to kind of multidimensionality of Sanghanusati, like which model do you kind of align with? And really the canon's ability to raise that up, and the Buddha's highlighting of it too, to give us these reference points and idols to live up to. But then just as you noted, first the fact that these are all most of them are arahants, and yet they still go to just talk about Dhamma, to listen to a Dhamma talk. And, on one level you could think, well, what do they have to listen to a teaching for? Many of them are enlightened. But the fact that even arahants or beings of various stages of enlightenment still just rejoice in speaking about Dhamma. Venerable Sariputta's skillful and humble steering of the conversation, as you noted, not towards his own Dhamma talk, but just asking questions of his companions is so sweet and humble. And then I think what's very noticeable is, as you noted, Venerable Mahāgosiṅga, who is known as foremost in psychic powers, but how instead of praising psychic powers, which the Buddha really said, these kind of mundanes, well, they're super mundane in one sense, but they're not necessarily necessary, or even in some cases conducive to full awakening. And in one discourse, the Buddha says of 3 different miracles, that of psychic powers, of clairvoyance, or instruction, which is the highest of the miracles. And the Buddha says it is the miracle of instruction. And how Mahāgosiṅga doesn't reference all these other psychic powers. He references basically instruction and speaking about Dhamma with someone in line with Dhamma. And that's such a precise movement of conversation. And he's got this very intimate, long relationship with Venerable Sariputta. It's one of the most famous friendships in the whole canon. They kind of were companions even before going forth in the Buddha Sasana. And how he talks about how this talking about Dhamma is what he values most, and then skillfully steers the conversation right back to Venerable Sariputta. He's the one to put the question back to him. And just the subtlety and beauty and grace of seeing these great beings interact even over 2,500 years, it's kind of astounding to get a glimpse. And then the Buddha, who beautifully, he doesn't reference any of these particular qualities, many of which the listeners will not have access to, or not be inclined towards. Some people can't get, the jhana of Revata, Venerable Revata. But what he references is what the common denominator is, what we all can do, which is to strive, to be diligent, to try for the ending of the effluence. And him foregrounding that is just so appropriate and beautiful. Yeah, quite a discourse. What else would you have to draw out of this or speak to?
We're talking about these foremost disciples. So there is in the Anguttara Nikayas, the Buddha does kind of give this list of superlatives, his monastics, monks, and nun disciples, and of lay people, laymen, lay women, and Ananda, whereas most people are just superlative in one thing, including Sariputta, foremost in great wisdom, whereas Ananda is foremost in 5 qualities. He's foremost in having heard much, that is in learning. He's foremost in having good memory. He's foremost in having a quick grasp. He's foremost among those who are resolute. And he's foremost of personal attendance. So, yeah, just an all-around great monk. Ajahn, anything else you'd like to draw out?
Just maybe very briefly, the fact that there is a scene where Venerable Mahākassapa, you noted he gives this long list of things, including ascetic practices. And there's a sutta where the Buddha invites Mahākassapa in his old age to live near him, to accept robes from householders instead of wearing rags, to basically take it easy. And he refuses and says, look, I actually have a comfortable abiding, and I do this out of compassion for future generations. And the Buddha praises him. And just to note that this is one reason in the teaching why you don't give up standards, even after enlightenment, because it's out of compassion for future generations and setting an example. So, Ajahn, what is the word of the week?
The word of the week is sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And it means, in this context, well said, or that's excellent. And it comes from the root, which means to accomplish, and it occurs 1,270 times in the canon.
So many times.
So many. It's almost like a Clear Mountain gathering. So many sadhus. So,
Ajahn, thank you.
all right.
We'll see all of you, or some of you, for Zoom after this, and otherwise next week for Majjhima Nikaya 33. So, Ajahn.